This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. The controversy over whether to open adoption records to persons searching for their birth parents has no easy solutions. There are strong arguments from advocates on both sides of this very emotional issue. Today we'll look at the topic of adoption and open records with our guest Julie Goldman, who happens to be an attorney, and Vice President of the Council for Equal Rights and Adoption, and Nancy Erickson, a family attorney and spokesperson for the National Council for Adoption. Hello, Julie. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
Now, Julie, tell me a little about your story. You're adopted.
Yes.
And at one point in your life you said, I'm going to find my adoptive parents.
Well, it didn't quite happen that way. It was over the course of time that I made the decision.
And what did you do?
Well, I did a search. I joined the organization for which now I'm vice president, and I was able to make the search. I had information which allowed me to find my family very easily.
But aren't most records confidential?
The records in the courts are confidential, but my parents had some records from my adoption. So I had my last name, which was very unusual.
Well, Nancy, what's the position of your organization? Now, that's the National Council for Adoption.
Yes.
Do you believe that all records should be opened?
No. I first should mention that I'm not an employee of the organization. I'm an attorney, and I've worked with the NCFA on some cases. I think they take a very balanced position, which is that to retain the whole concept of adoption the way it exists now, we must have confidentiality. However, if both sides wish to waive their right to confidentiality, that's fine. And in many states, a majority of states now, parties can register that they wish to waive their confidentiality and they wish to be able to get in contact with the other side.
But let's take the example of Julie. Julie wanted to contact her natural parents. Now, if her natural parents did not register and did not want this contact, does that mean Julie would never meet her natural parents?
That's correct, and we believe that that's the correct position, because when Julie's birth parents placed her for adoption, they were operating under a concept of confidentiality, both in terms of lawyer and social worker and medical.
Were you there?
No, I wasn't there, but I know that that's the way it was usually done in those days. Now, if her birth parents wished to have contact, in most states they can do that by registering.
Well, I disagree. There are what's called these registries that are set up in various states. Unfortunately, the registries do not work. I have met many people who have come to our organization who are searching for their family members, be it the birth parent searching for the lost child, or the adoptee searching for the birth parent, and we've come across cases where they were both in the registry for several years and neither one was matched up.
Well, obviously that shouldn't happen, and the laws must be changed to make sure that that doesn't happen.
First of all, I believe that there shouldn't be this interference by the government deciding who we should or should not know. It's the only law in this country that protects someone from their own actions.
So it's your opinion that all records should be open?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, we're one of the only countries that have closed records. Most other countries, except for some third world countries, have open records.
So Julie, what if the natural parents do not, and they make this very plain, do not want to be contacted
Well, let me explain
by
something.
the child, the baby they given up for
Okay,
adoption?
but there's two issues about that. Confidentiality seems to be the issue that everyone seems to be hanging on to. And the first thing I'd like to say about that is the original law, at least in the state of New York, was not set up to seal the records to be confidential from the parties involved. It was set up to be confidential from outside sources to protect blackmail situations, etc. The original law did not focus on this confidentiality. Second of all, confidentiality is a myth because the law as it stands, there is a provision in that law which states that upon good cause shown, you're entitled to see your
Yes,
records.
but good
Therefore, it's
cause
not an
is-
absolute, wait a minute, therefore it's not an absolute statement by the law that this is going to be private. So this whole idea about confidentiality doesn't really exist because the law does provide for an adoptee to find out information about their parents, and this confidentiality just doesn't exist.
Well, we need to distinguish between identifying information and non-identifying information. Most states by this time will make available to adopted persons non-identifying information, such as the age, ethnic background, educational attainment, and many other aspects of the birth parents.
Now, just
we'll
let me
make
just-
that and certain medical records. Now that's one issue, and NCFA says that that's very important for an adopted person to be able to get. But identifying information that might lead the adopted person to be able to locate the birth parents without the birth parents' consent is another matter.
Julie, tell me for 1 second, please. Just give me a little personal item here. Tell me a little about yourself. Tell me about your upbringing. How was your life growing up? And when you sought to meet your natural parents, and tell me how that worked out.
My family was very supportive. In fact, my mother, when I told my mother, my adoptive mother, that I wanted to search, she said to me that she's been waiting for many years for me to say that question.
Were you told right away that you were adopted?
Yes. I was not told the actual story of what happened because at the time they were told, my parents were told to make up a story so that I wouldn't ask questions. You know, most people, if not all, who are adopted either consciously or unconsciously know their particular story. My family has been very supportive. In fact, I have to say, I just won my case in Pennsylvania. I'm getting my birth certificate, my original unamended birth certificate tomorrow morning. And I'm excited
And then what
about
happened?
that.
And then you sought to meet your natural parents.
Yes.
What happened then?
Unfortunately, my parents were deceased, but I did find 6 siblings who are alive. I have
Brothers and sisters?
brothers and sisters, and they have kids, and I have this wonderful family that has welcomed me in. I spent the Christmas and New Year holiday with them, and it's been wonderful. And it's really amazing how many people in this world, number one, either aren't aware that we're not entitled to our information, or are so against this, and we cannot even understand.
Did they know that they had an adopted child, that there was an adopted brother or sister or that was adopted?
In that particular, in my family, it was, the story basically was told to them that my mother had a beautiful baby girl, but the cord was wrapped around her neck and she died. All right, so they thought 30 years ago, 35 years ago when I was born, that I died. So they had no idea that I was out there. They weren't surprised when I came back. But they really didn't have any idea, and it happens to me, my father was very sick at the time. So as far as I can tell, my mother and father just couldn't raise me because my father really was going to die.
Well, how did you go about it? Did you write them letters first? Did you call them? How did...
My family?
Yes.
When I got the information, I called them.
And you said, hello, I'm your sister, hello?
Well, I didn't know. When I first made the contact, the person who I contacted was my sister on my father's side. I didn't know who my mother was or my father. All I had was my last name. And so I had no idea what her first name was. When I contacted her, I thought that my sister was my mother. Turns out she was my sister, amongst others.
And they've welcomed you into the
Yes.
family?
Yes.
Okay. If you had to give advice for somebody who wanted to do the same thing you did, under the restrictions that now, under the laws, like in our state, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, where we're shown, how did you go about it?
How do they go about the search?
How do they go about?
Well, the best thing I can, every state is different, every situation is different. What I would advise is that if somebody wants to search, they go to an organization in their area, and they'll be able to tell them how to search legally for the information that they need. There are resources out there for people to search, and you can't do it on, it's very hard to do it on your own because you don't know where these resources are.
Well, are these governmental resources?
I really can't, I have to be honest with you, I really do not want to say where the resources are, because as I have seen in the past, and other people from my organization have seen in the past, if I disclose where those resources are, people who are against this will try and get those particular records out of the public access.
Nancy, how do you feel about that?
About what?
Well, here we have naturally children who have been given up for adoption.
Now adults.
Now adults, or still perhaps teenagers or whatever, now seeking their natural parents and their siblings, their natural siblings.
Well, of course, the persons about whom I have the most concern are unfortunately no longer with us, and that is her biological, natural birth parents, whatever
We're
name you want to put on
now
them.
for other people.
I think it's very nice that she has found a welcoming family. That is not always the case, and particularly when the birth parents do not want their confidentiality breached. There have been some very serious problems when the biological children have turned up.
What kind
I don't
of
want to go
problems
into
could there
the
be?
Well, the problems are, for example, let's say that the story, which by the way is very common, the story that your family apparently gave that the child died. What if this is the story that's been given in the family? Then the child turns up.
As in Julie's case.
But turns up to the birth parents. Now they are revealed as having told lies, and they may not want any contact with the child. Now that may seem heartless, but they have a new life.
They have legal remedies. People in our position do not
They don't have remedies once the so-called cat is out of the bag. I mean, once confidentiality is broken, it's broken.
But there's
no way to get the confidentiality back.
Let me take it to a legal principle. If a person goes and talks to a lawyer, all right, they tell their lawyer whatever they tell. Is there confidentiality between those two people?
Yes.
Because of the attorney-client privilege, and also because they were there. If you included a third person in that, wouldn't they be part of the confidentiality of that little group? And nobody else would know what was said, and it would be confidential?
Well, actually, it doesn't work that way. If you bring another person into your attorney-client relationship, it breaks the confidentiality.
For the attorney-client,
I don't want to confuse the issue.
Okay, my point was this, is that the mother and the child are there. There cannot be any confidentiality between two people who share the most intimate moment of their life. Okay, there's no confidentiality. I lived in my mother's stomach for 9 months. There are studies that show that a child, when born, can pick out its mother's face on the first day. They recognize their heartbeat. They recognize their voice. They hear things. This is all proven facts. And if someone was to say that a baby was born and the mother died, the reaction would be, oh, how sad.
Julie, however,
adoption does not get that reaction.
I don't see how that relates to
Julie,
this.
can you at least see the example of perhaps a mother giving up her child for adoption and just saying to herself emotionally, that's it, I want to go on to another step, whether or not it was an unwed mother situation, or it could be many, many situations, as a financial, whatever.
Exactly,
and she wants to go on to another life and doesn't want to really emotionally face this.
Well, or she wishes to emotionally face it, and she wishes to have that part of her life ended, and to go on and to know that this child is in a good situation, a permanent situation.
Wait a minute, okay. First of all, there's no such thing, there's ex-wives, ex-husbands, there's no such thing as ex-children. That just doesn't exist, okay? The concerns that I have about this is, you know, as far as a child coming back and coming into their life, if the person does not want the individual to be a part of their life, they have legal remedies, just as if any other person was bothering them.
I understand that, but just as you have already said, there are certain ways that at least you or your organization knows about to find out who the natural parents are, although you won't disclose these ways, and I understand that. But from the natural parent's point of view, can you at least see that they may have a point of view where they don't want to even discuss it with their child who they've given up for adoption?
Well, the statistics that I know is that anyone who does a search, 99% of the people who do a search and find their families get accepted into those families. There is the 1% that do get turned away, and usually half of that 1% people change their mind. They're entitled to make that decision. The problem that we have here is we have government intrusion into the family life to the extent that it is protecting one person's rights versus another's. Why does the birth mother have more rights over the adopted adult?
We have to understand what adoption is now in society and whether we want to change the whole concept of adoption.
And we're going to explore that further right after this break. You're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us. Hello, I'm Alan Schnorman, the host of Lawline, and I want to give you some important information about your legal rights. If you were seriously injured in an automobile, a fall down, or construction accident, you may be entitled to a substantial money award for your pain and suffering. It is important to speak to a knowledgeable attorney in that field. At my firm, Solomon & Schnorman, our practice is limited to personal injury law. We fight for the rights of accident victims. Don't try to evaluate the case yourself. If you have any questions about your accident, call us at 1-800-LAWLINE. If you're too injured to come to our office, we will come to you. The consultation is free, and we only get paid when your case is settled or won. Remember, the insurance companies have lawyers protecting their interests, and so should you. Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. We're talking about adoptions. Should adoptive records be opened? Our guests are Julie Goldman, an attorney and vice president of the Council for Equal Rights in Adoption, and Nancy Erickson, spokesperson for the National Council for Adoption. Nancy, before Julie had given some statistics, and she said 99% of the parents, the natural parents that are contacted by their adopted child, open their arms to the child. Have you found that to be true as well?
I don't have the statistics on that. I want to get back to an issue that I think is very important, and that is that we have to decide whether we want to retain the current concept of what adoption is. Adoption now legally takes the child out of the birth family and puts the child totally in to the adoptive family as though the child were born into that family.
And that's
it is a permanent,
right. That's correct.
Permanent thing.
Irrevocable.
Under most circumstances, yes. And it is an engrafting of that child onto a new family tree. Now, if we want to change that, if we want to say that adoption should be a temporary thing, that it should be kind of like foster care or something, and you take care of the child until the child's 18, and then the child goes back to the biological family, the birth family, that's a decision that society has to make. But right now, the whole concept of adoption is that it is permanent. And that's one of the reasons for the confidentiality.
Well, first of all, I think we have to take this back a little bit because we're focusing on the word adoption. It's really, adoption is not in and of itself something that's bad. Adoption is a remedy that was created many, many years ago in order to provide homes for children who do not have families, find them families. Adoption itself is not the problem. The problem is the separation of mother and child. Okay? The adoption is necessary at times. But one thing I have to say about adoption is that's okay if you want to put a child in another family because the child doesn't have a family. But one, we should not be trying to provide babies for families, and we should not be expecting that a child growing up in another family is not going to want to know where they come from. All right? If that was the case, if it was not important to know where we came from, why don't we just take everybody's birth certificate and switch them, or switch, one person has a baby, let's give it to the next person.
Julie,
it doesn't,
when did this quest of yours start? How old were you?
I've been thinking about it since I was able to have any kind of conscious thoughts.
That you wanted to meet your natural parents?
Well, no, at the age, I believe it was at the age of 2 that my parents told me what adoption was. And over the years, I have made mention to friends and family about wanting to search. But since it was not a discussion that we had regularly in my house, I didn't feel that I could talk about it all that much.
Did you want to speak to your adoptive parents to find out who they were, why they put you up for adoption? Did you have a million questions for them?
Yes. First of all, I didn't know until the age of 12, I believe, is that my parents were actually alive. The story that I was told was that my parents died in the big car crash that everybody else died in.
The same, it's almost like a reverse story
well,
that they
that's the story
had
that they were told, and that's what, years ago, everyone used to believe that as a baby you start with a, blank slate, tabula rasa, that you can start from the beginning. But the truth is that you can't. And I do have a heritage, and I didn't know, because I bought into the whole story, because as a child, how can I think that my parents gave me away?
It's almost like a rejection.
Exactly. Well, that's what it feels like. It's not that, but that's what it feels like. It feels like there's something about you that created the problem, but that's not the case. Generally, it's circumstances. But I didn't know to the age of 12 or 13 that my parents were actually alive. And from that point on, it was something that I constantly thought about. I constantly thought about what my parents looked like and how many kids they have, and it was an empty spot inside. And there's nothing, nobody could fill that for you. It has nothing to do with the adoptive parent. My parents were the most wonderful people I ever known. I love my parents dearly. Okay, I can't even say more than that. I mean, that expresses it alone. But they can't give me the one thing that I needed, and that was to find where I came from. Do people explore their roots for no reason? I mean, there isn't. We have a reason that we have a need on this earth to be part of something. And I don't know who it was that said this, but that in order to feel grounded in your life, you really need to know 3 generations of your family. And being adopted and forced, into another family with my heritage basically cut off. That was taken away from me. I didn't know what my background was. And granted, yes, today the laws are different. Now they provide you with information with respect to your heritage. When I was born, I didn't have any of that. I just found out.
How long now has it been that you've been with your natural family?
It'll be 2 years on the 4th of February.
And do you have siblings from your adoptive family as well?
I have one sister, yes.
And how does she feel about this?
She had a little concern at the beginning. She thought it was about the family, and she thought she was very scared about it. But she, just like my parents, everyone has seen, I'm not going anywhere. Okay, they're my family. I grew up with them. That doesn't change. They're
Nancy,
still my family.
now, of course, Julie makes some compelling arguments, very emotional family arguments. How do you respond to that?
That I believe that the registry, if properly run, and if there are problems with it, and Julie says there are, then they ought to be amended. But if properly run, the registry should allow her to link up with her biological family.
But again, that's only
and
if they register and only if they want to register.
But who has
and
a
only
right?
if they know they can register.
Who has a right to know their background? If my mother didn't tell me about any of my heritage...
Are you adopted?
No. But if my mother didn't tell me about any of my heritage, and my grandparents, the ones who were still alive, didn't want to tell me, I wouldn't learn anything. And my parents had no obligation to tell me the circumstances of my birth, of their relationship. They had no obligation. They told me what they wanted to tell me.
Why would they even
And I'm
have
sure there were
to?
things they didn't tell me.
You know where you came from. You don't have to question it. This is something that it drives me crazy, because people who haven't experienced this do not understand the hole on the inside.
I can
how you feel about
understand that.
knowing where you come from.
What I can't, where I draw the line is that the biological parents, the birth parents, have a right to consideration, to respect, and to confidentiality if they wish to keep it.
I just have to ask one question. As your position, are you a member of the triad at all? Are you an adoptee, birth parent, or adoptive parent?
I'm not.
Then why your interest in this?
Julie, I'm not going to get into a personal thing here, but what I want to know is your advice first to birth mothers who are giving up their child for adoption. What's your advice to them regarding the adopted child? And second, what's your advice to the family adopting? What should they tell their child? Please.
Okay, as far as the birth parent goes,
Or parents.
Parents, sorry.
Parent or parents.
I think that it's important before anybody makes a decision to surrender a child, they should really have some counseling to see what their options are.
Absolutely.
All right, absolutely should have counseling, because what I have found from the people that I've met is that where they're told they're going to go on with their life, and what it really turns out to is that they end up being stuck at that point of the life where they actually surrendered their child. They never do quite go on. How can you forget a child that you gave birth to? So I would suggest for birth parents seeking to have some answers to their situation to seek counseling. There are situations of open adoption now. So there are options, is my point. As far as I think you
The
asked me-
adoptive parents.
The adoptive parents, I think it's very important that they are supportive with their children that they adopt, and that they give them their truth. That it should be a situation where they have the information where the child can actually see their mother, see where they came from, have the information necessary for growing up. This is information that in normal closed adoption is not provided
So they
to them.
should tell, in your opinion, they should tell the child who their mother was, where the mother lives,
Yes.
everything right from the beginning.
Yes, and they should allow their child to express their feelings, and invite them to say, how do you feel about that? Does this bother you? Does it not bother you? Are you sad?
What's your
Are you
opinion
happy?
regarding visitation with the natural mother? How would you have liked it?
I would have loved to have an open adoption with contact with my mother constantly. Unfortunately, because of the circumstances of the laws, etc., I was not able to meet
And
my
going
birth
back to that
parents.
same couple quickly that wants to give up, couple or mother wants to give up their child for adoption, and they've made that decision, but what's your advice regarding their relationship with the child?
Well, if they're given the opportunity to have a relationship, I think that they should. They should have contact, and they should be involved in their life. Obviously, the adoptive parents are going to be the ones that are going to raise the child, but the child should not be forced out of the connection with
Julie,
their birth
unfortunately, we've
parents.
run out of time. Julie Goldman, thank you very much
Thank you. I just
for
like
appearing on Lawline.
I would just
Quickly.
like to say quickly, if anyone needs search help, you can
Hurry.
reach the Council for Equal Rights and Adoption, 212-988-0110.
Okay, thank you. You heard it here. And Nancy Erickson, thank you for appearing on
You're
Lawline.
very welcome.
And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law.